Right, so I'm going to walk you just very briefly through how you send data to a server. Most of the time you're going to allow users to read data or like look at something on a page, but sometimes you need user feedback, and that's where forms and post come into play, right? So here in our Express app, we import Express, and we need an external package called body parser. And then we instantiate the app, we add some static middleware, and here we do something that's important. BodyParser.url encoded means that when there is data coming into the server, this will run and it will convert that data into a format that we then can consume from our JavaScript here. Then we put a views folder up so that we can read some views when we want to render some pages. We set our view engine to AGS, and here we have two endpoints. So we see that the root endpoint is going to render the index page, and it's going to set message to world. And if we then look down here, we see that we have a post endpoint /foo, and if we send a post request to this server, it looks like, it's gonna render the index page, and it's gonna set message to whatever in body.name. So we then listen on port 3000, we're running the server, I can see, and if I go to my web page and I do this, so here we have our web page. Now we hit the index endpoint, which is this here. So message is now set to world. So what happens if I do Frederick and then I click submit? Okay, cool. So now we're at /foo and the message has been switched out for Frederick. Now, what happened was simply that we sent a post message and Express skipped this endpoint because this is a get which doesn't match the post. Then it hits this endpoint and see, oh, it's /foo, which matches the URL we're sending our data to, right? And then it runs this code. And all it does is it renders this HTML page and sets message to whatever message is. Now, if we look at the DOM structure here, we can see that the form, this field and this button, is inside a form element. And form elements are in HTML a very special element which allows you to send data. Now, you declare an action, which is like, where do you want this form to be submitted? So I said /foo, which matches what we saw earlier. And then I say method post. That's also important because in general you're going to use either a get method on the HTTP protocol to get data or post to send data to the server. If we open up this, we see that there's an input tag here. We have a type of text and name. Here's an important thing. Now, the name attribute on the input element allows me to identify what piece of data is going to be sent to the server. As you can see here, that I'm actually looking for body.name, and this variable here matches the name here. And then I have an input call of the type submit, which is the thing that I use to submit the form. And this is a very trivial, basic application that allows me to send data, but for the most part, this is actually how things work on the web. Now, as I said, this is a basic example, but now you know how every time every single time you've registered on a login page, or like anytime you've filled out your username and password or anything like that, this is exactly what's happening. This is what you're doing. You're putting in some data into a form in general, hitting that login button, and that's going to whoever you're trying to log into, their server, and then they process that data and send you to wherever you're going. So yeah, these are the basics of sending data to a server.